Rather infamously, November, as some of you might know and some of you might not know, is No Nut November. And I don't want to spend too much time on the topic of No Nut November. Suffice to say, I'm not convinced at all that not nutting is the key to acquiring some sort of magical set of powers. I've seen absolutely zero empirical evidence for it. I think a lot of it is just subjective feeling. And there's a reason why a lot of guys feel that, subjectively speaking, not nutting is some powerful tool in the arsenal of quote-unquote ascension. Because the ultimate origin of not nutting, or No Nut November, basically not wanking off, has a lot to do with the prominence and the popularity of pornography. Now, before we go into that, I just want to point out some fundamental differences between the day and age we live in and the day and age that I grew up in. Way back in the day, there really wasn't any porn available. It was available, but if you wanted to check it out, you'd have to go to what one might have called a smut peddler. These really seedy shops in some street or back alley. And it was such an embarrassing undertaking that almost nobody wanted to do it. You certainly didn't want to be caught doing it. And if people saw you doing it, you were pretty much willing to take that hit. And on top of that, sometimes there would be quote-unquote dirty magazines, and they would be at newsstands, always enwrapped in some kind of cellophane or cover. And as a teenager, you kind of wanted to have a quick gander and a quick look at it, and you'd look at it, and it'd be a little bit embarrassing because porn as such did not exist in its current accessible state. It was a very, very rare thing. Of course, this goes back to the whole reason why, way back in the day, among other reasons, marriage was also a popular thing, because that was the way that guys were able to get laid. But things have changed a lot, and porn over the ensuing decades has become a lot more popular, but more importantly, a lot more accessible. And so these days, it's far easier to get access to it, and it's instantaneous. As a consequence, a lot of the younger types, millennials, but especially Zoomers, have developed what some people dub a porn addiction. They check out porn every day, several times a day, etc., etc. And a lot of the quote-unquote no-nut philosophy is ultimately derivative of this idea of moving away from porn as a harmful activity. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but again, much of the mentality behind this comes from people who are officially addicted to porn, more or less. They spend every waking hour watching porn, or at least daily, and they really, really struggle getting away from that. And so the idea of not nutting implies not watching any pornography and not really tapping into that side of one's humanity. And that's all well and good if you want to do that. But beyond that, of course, as many of you might know, pornography is generally viewed as a negative, and there's some evidence to suggest that it is if you watch it excessively. My view, of course, like with many things, is everything in moderation. Excessively watching porn is bad. Watching any porn at all, is that the worst thing in the world? I'm not so sure. But a lot of people advocate that. And interestingly enough, the idea that pornography being a bad thing is something that is often a view shared across the aisles, which is to say, both the left view it that way and the right view it that way, albeit for slightly different reasons. The right typically doesn't like pornography because it's quote-unquote degenerate, or if you're religious, it takes you away from your deity, or it's emasculating, or something along those lines. The left typically doesn't like pornography because it's degrading to women, because it changes men's standards and perceptions of women. Having seen hot pornographic actresses, when they're dealing with the real thing, they lose interest. In fact, that final point is something that's often shared as a talking point between the left and the right. And so there has been a virtual crusade, online crusade that is, against pornography that is fought by both the left and the right for overlapping reasons, but also separate reasons. But again, my position is everything in moderation. I'm not so sure that pornography as such is just fundamentally a bad thing. Clearly is a bad thing when you do it excessively, and that's true of many things in life. But we're going to get to the heart of the video now, and that is this constant notion we hear and that pornography is terrible and it's warping young men's minds and it's destroying the fabric of society and yada, yada, yada. And it's funny because a lot of the criticism regarding pornography comes from an angle from both the left and the right, albeit for slightly different reasons, as mentioned just prior, comes from an angle that basically implies that the reason why pornography is bad is that it ruins men's relationships with women. It makes them incapable of having, quote-unquote, healthy, functional relationships. And the reason why men need to stop watching pornography is for women's sake. Now, this is just ultimately, in this format, another version of a man-up argument. Stop watching pornography because it's bad for women. Yes, it's also bad for you on some level, they'll argue, but ultimately, the reason why you should stop engaging in pornography is because women are harmed most by it. According to the left, it's degrading to women. According to the right, it emasculates you, and so on and so forth. So these arguments go. Okay, so far, so good. Because we're already used to this refrain. We've heard this probably a billion times. Because there's always some version of the man-up argument. Don't watch porn because it hurts women. Don't be broke because it hurts women. Don't do X, Y, Z because it hurts women. You can make this argument theoretically for anything that revolves around society, social interactions, and mating and dating. But given the highly gynocentric society that we currently live in, it shouldn't surprise anyone that there is a massive, truly massive elephant in the room, and it is the parallel to men's alleged addiction to pornography, and that is women's addiction to social media. Now, before I go down this route, let's just point out that there are plenty of women that watch lots of porn too. People make it out as if it were only men watching pornography, and there probably is a certain majority in terms of total numbers over women, but women still make copious use of pornography. There is good evidence for this. There are stats you can check out on various websites, so on and so forth. So it's not just a male problem, despite what the media, what the left and right will tell you. But in terms of social media, we also know that overwhelmingly it is women that make greater use of social media. They use it constantly to vet themselves in the world, to compare themselves to other females, to get attention from males, to show off their quote-unquote style, which is a type of pissing contest ultimately between women to show what looks better and who looks better in this dress versus that dress. And the funny thing is that parallel to the claims about pornography ruining men's ability to commit to relationships and have relationships, there are arguably even more deleterious effects when it comes to the social media addiction that many, many women suffer from. Because the reality is, as I pointed out recently in a video about choice, and I've talked about for many years, is that overabundance of choice, overabundance of options leads to the misperception of reality that you have every option in the world, which is to say, if in fact it's the case that pornography ruins men's ability to commit and follow through on relationships, social media ruins women's ability to even find a relationship and to quote-unquote commit and stay in the relationship. But on this particular point, of course, you will hear not a single peep or squeak from anybody. Listen to the Jordan Petersons of the world. Listen to any of the mainstream or mainstream adjacent talking pundits, and they will say nothing about this. Because in the mainstream, and even in the mainstream adjacent areas, it is always men's fault. There's no sense of accountability, no sense of purported responsibility, nothing. It's just men's fault. But again, the reality is that social media addiction, and here I'm very much including apps such as Bumble and Tinder and Hinge and what have you, these things siphon off women's ability to discern and women's ability to live in a reality that constrains them, which again leads to the result of perpetual dissatisfaction and the inability to even find relationships, let alone commit to them. And that's just on the relationship level. Arguably, the only thing pornography does is helps you bust a nut. Because arguably, the only thing pornography does is help you bust a nut quickly and knock it out, which oftentimes is all men really want to do, let's be perfectly honest. However, with women, social media isn't just about that. Obviously, it has very little to do with that. More often than not, it is a 24/7 revolving door. It's constant involvement. It's not watching porn for 5 or 10 minutes, knocking it out and getting on with your day, which oftentimes is what porn amounts to for most guys. It is a never-ending project of commitment, of obsession, and of dedication. Now, sometimes you will hear from pundits and people that social media is harming women, in the sense that it sets terrible standards for them, beauty standards, and makes them feel bad about themselves, right? It's always how women are suffering in a negative sense with respect to themselves that are being projected onto them. But they don't talk about women's behavior and the negative effects that result from women's engagement in social media with respect to human relationships, and not just male ones, but friendships as well. They never talk about that. Shockingly, of course, because why would they ever talk about that? And if I wanted to formulate an analogy, I would say that for the most part, pornography is something that men occasionally engage in. They knock it out, whatever. Yes, there are some addicts, and for them, I guess not nutting is some kind of solution of some sort. But in contrast to the occasional enjoyment and perusal of porn, social media much more likens, to my view, a kind of IV drip. You always need to be plugged in, and it never stops. And women, in particular, need to be plugged in 24/7. Women care a lot more about their personal reputation and image. They're certainly much more concerned about what other women are doing, and so they have to keep up with it nonstop, 24/7. And the problem is, as usual, that we only hear about the terrible things men are doing, or not doing, depending on the time and day. And long term, this is fairly catastrophic, because there's no light at the end of this tunnel. There's no sign that even the slightest smidgen of accountability will be demanded of women, because, as usual, all of it will be placed on men. All the burden, all the responsibility, everything placed on men. And when you're powerless, you can't have responsibility. What can you do in this day and age to really be quote-unquote responsible? No. All you do is get finger-pointing and blame. Because, for better or worse, women have become the untouchables of our society. No criticism of their behavior is valid. No requirement that they might behave differently is valid. And everything is offloaded to men. I'm just going to say it plainly and simply. Given that model that we have right now, is the juice worth the squeeze? No, it's not. Not at all. Who wants to live or exist in a world where everything is your fault, there's almost nothing you can do to redeem yourself, and if you point things out that are blatantly obvious, you still receive the blame, and it's still your responsibility to take care of it? Who wants to live in that world? Maybe a few men do, but most of us don't. And so this will continue until it can't continue anymore. But the pornography finger-pointing, as I might refer to it now, is absolutely ludicrous in light of women's addiction to social media. Social media is women's pornography, and I would argue the addiction to it is far more ubiquitous, far more severe, and far more intense. Yes, there are some men that are addicted to porn, but show me, say, a young modern woman who isn't in some way, shape, or form not addicted to social media. They're all making copious use of it, almost without exception. And you can't say the same about men and pornography, if only because pornography tends to be a short-term engagement, and social media is a perpetual one, 24/7. It never ends. And here's where I offer my view of what's to be done about this. Now, in keeping with MGTOW thoughts, I would say, just check out. The world doesn't care about you. It never will. And to the extent that it does care about you, it's all contingent upon your performance. And the minute you stop performing, the minute you falter and fall, even if you pick yourself up again, is when the world will stop caring about you. All you are as a man is a performance. And the performance these days doesn't even get you very much. So you can perform, but all you are at the end of the day in today's extremely gynocentric setup is a dancing monkey. Do you want to be a dancing monkey? Well, you can try, but I don't think it's worth it. People say, what are the alternatives? Yeah, the alternative is to check out and just do your own thing. It's not as glorious, and you're going to lose out on opportunities that you might have had. But do you know when those opportunities existed? These opportunities did not exist in your lifetime. They existed decades ago. You're not missing out on anything that's available now. People talk about, you miss out on marriage and family and blah, blah, blah. Really? Marriage and family has been a broken institution for decades, even before social media. In fact, the height of divorce was in the 70s and the 80s. It's gone down since then, although not significantly. So this idea that you're missing out on something if you don't commit to traditional views, standards, whatever, is poppycock. Sometimes in life you have to make do with what you have. Given the current meta of our world, what are the options? There are not many options for the vast majority of men. Most men would be best served, in my opinion, by just doing their own thing. Pining away for a world that used to exist, but has not existed for a very long time, and that is morphing into an ever greater monstrosity of incompatible contradictions is, to my mind at least, not a way to live. And so ultimately, gentlemen, the decision is up to you. But when all you hear from the other side, and all you hear globally, socially, is that it's your fault, and no sense of responsibility or accountability or overview or oversight is ever put on the shoulders of women and their defenders, what are the options? I don't think there are many options other than to go your own way, as they say. Anyway, as always, thank you for tuning in. Please hit the like button, subscribe if you're not yet a subscriber, hit the bell icon to follow my videos, and if I'm still alive, I will check you out later. May the gods watch over you. You take care. Enjoy your forthcoming weekend. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.